It all started in the spring of 1982 in downtown Kitchener with a $6,000 government grant. A young married couple who just graduated from St. Jerome's College at the University of Waterloo started with an idea about building a community of interest, responding to unemployment and poverty through creative action. And what a social ecosystem, a community they have built. This community feeds hundreds daily at their community kitchen, operating a secondhand furniture and thrift shop, a barter system, providing housing and supportive housing for people who would otherwise be homeless, fixing bicycles and selling bikes at very low prices, a community garden, a cafe, dental services for the poor, preparing income taxes for the poor, and so much more. Over 100 people employed and over 500 volunteers. This husband and wife team was recognized with the Benemerenti Medal, a papal honor in 2014. They were made members of the Order of Canada in 2016, and they received honorary doctorates from their alma mater, the University of Waterloo, in October 2019. And I'm pleased to welcome Joe Mancini to this edition of The Old Grey Mares. All right, Joe, welcome to the podcast.
Welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Or should I say Dr. Joe?
No, I don't think you should say that.
So, Joe, it's funny. Today, as I was getting ready for this podcast, I was on Google, and they always have this thing, a Google Doodle or what have you, and you click on it, and it's some commemoration for the day. And what was interesting about today was they were celebrating the birth of Bertha von Suttner. And I don't know if you know this person. She was an Austrian author from the late 1800s into the start of the 20th century. And she became the first Nobel Peace Prize winner in 1905. And interestingly, she was Albert Nobel's secretary for a period of time. But there was a quote attributed to her, and I thought of you with respect to this quote, and I'll just read it. It goes, "After the verb to love, to help is the most beautiful verb in the world." And I thought, how appropriate for someone like yourself.
It is really appropriate in that the Working Center is mostly about helping other people. And I think, what did we call ourselves? A self-help unemployment resource center back in 1982. But really what we found was relationships that developed because we were supporting people, whether unemployed or didn't have food. And there was just a sense of building friendship, of helping. And to me, after coming out of university, this was way more important than anything else.
And that's what I want to talk to you about today is focusing on, and a lot of people know about the great work the Working Center does. And, there's not enough words to commend you and Stephanie for the fantastic work and what you've created in the downtown. But I want to go back to the beginning and look at what it was that, here you are, just two kids basically, coming out of university in 82 and having this idea, whatever that was originally. I don't know if it's, obviously things grow and morph into something beyond what you could even have conceived, I'm sure. But what was that initial idea, and what were the key concepts to making that grow?
Well, it's funny. I guess if we had some vision, we had a vision of the meaning of community and how do you bring people together? And that is so wishy-washy. You can't possibly think that anything could develop from that. But from that initial impulse, we actually were operating a job search resource center. In May 17th is when we signed the lease. And the idea was to sketch out an idea. When we were kind of going in April, but May 1st is when we started. But by the 17th, we already had sketched out an idea and we're ready to go, and we opened early June. And I think right away we started just helping people, like typing resumes, creating a message service, We started serving some food at noon. These are really practical things, and we were hearing people's stories, and they were so meaningful that we said, "Wow, this is really important. We need to keep doing this."
Let's stop for a sec, though. Like it's 1982.
Yeah.
I don't know when
Rent was only $100
in downtown Kitchener, right?
Yeah, $100.
I'm not sure when
you
the
could
movie.
do a lot for $100.
I'm not sure when the movie Wall Street and Greed came out, but here we got two kids coming out of the University of Waterloo. And your program, what was your undergrad? You also did a master's, but what
I did
was
a
your
master's
undergrad?
in history. History.
It was history. So you weren't in social work or
Stephanie
something.
was English.
She was English.
Yeah.
So we got an English major.
With a little bit of both of us had a lot of religion thrown in there.
Okay. All right. And hence, yes, I appreciate that. I'm Catholic as well, so we share that. But so you've got two arts grads basically coming out, and most people will be out looking for work somewhere. Mm-hmm. But you basically, did you think about looking for work, or you said, I'm going to just start our own thing here? Well,
we were registered for Teachers College. We hadn't got in when we started. We were ready to, we thought we would go back to Tanzania to teach, work with that mission project we had been involved in.
Okay.
But in fact, even before we got the notice at the end of June that we were accepted, Teachers College, we were like, there's no way we're going to Teachers College. This is too important, what we're doing.
Right.
There's people here. There's a community. We're learning about unemployment and poverty in ways that, I had read about it in my Master's of History Canadian lecture workshop series, seminar series. I knew about the issues, but this was so real. And people's lives and stories are so important that. And not only that, but people needed there needed to be a bridge. Like people were wandering without any connections to formal services. We went to the Canada Employment Center, and they're like, "Well, people just need to get a job." And there's all these things that were barriers. And someone had told us, "No, what people really need is a place that's not the government that helps people get jobs."
How to figure it out?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And
it's that hand holding, so to speak.
Yeah.
And not in a bad way, in a good way to help them step up, right?
Yeah.
So just one sec. So you guys were in Tanzania for a period of time?
78, just for 2 months, 3 months or 2.5 months, building windmills for water. So Stephanie and I were relatively practically engaged.
Right.
And we had so part of our sustainability is that we had learned a lot about fundraising. We had gathered,
from that project.
Yes, we had helped, fill a container. I remember taking a truck to go get these barrels that I used to work in a factory to make, and then we brought them to Toronto, and then we filled them with goods. This was in 78, 79. And Stephanie was working with Brother Anthony on the fundraising part of it.
Right.
This was the new ideas around fundraising, mass mailings and things.
Yes.
And Stephanie was she was watching how that was all going and was participating in some of the
So this
work.
project then, it required you to fundraise to support the trip over to Tanzania, where you did the work that you did. And from that experience in Tanzania, it exposed you to what?
Well, we learned, it's a big part of our story. When I say that we were trying to create community, what we had learned in Tanzania was these villages had an essential kind of community that we're not so used to in Canada.
Right.
In
North America.
Stephanie and I are from Hamilton, and what we saw in Kitchener. We went to high school, but you live in your church community in Hamilton, but it only goes so deep, and people are left on their own. And what we were seeing at this new idea of the working center was a place where you could coalesce people together to support each other and to actually help through real difficult situations.
And is it something like that you were seeing in Tanzania in terms of the communities there supporting each other?
Oh, that's what we saw. And I guess maybe what we'd say is we saw people doing that who had absolutely no money.
Right.
Living in mud huts, essentially.
Yes.
But we saw community in that context. And so we wondered, why people who have so much money have less community than people who have no money but have a deeper sense of community.
So you finished school, you both applied to Teachers College, but in the meantime, you started up this employment resource center.
Yeah. And we were working out of a community already, in the sense that there was this thing, an organization called Global Community Center. And the people at Global Community Center were very interested in international development, just as we were. But there was a question that was asked, and it was, what do we know about the 2,000 workers just laid off at Bud? Do we know anything about that?
Right.
Like, we care about Tanzania, but do we know what's going on in our own backyard?
Yes.
And so in many ways, the Working Center's first question was to respond to that. Like, what do we know about poverty and unemployment in downtown Kitchener?
But was this Bud, and I don't know the time frame of it, was it prior to 82?
Yeah,
Around
I think
that
it was
time?
79 and 81.
Okay, so
were
this
the big
significant
layoffs.
event in Kitchener occurs, and it starts to draw in from your experiences in Tanzania and what you're seeing in community.
Yeah.
Were you continuing to work with the Global Community Center throughout that period of time before 82?
We were so different. So we learned very
You say
quickly.
we, you mean you and Stephanie?
Yes, in the sense that the reality of poverty and unemployment and the individuals involved were different than the people who would walk into Global Community Center that were concerned about international development.
Right.
They would
right.
tend to be university students or other people that cared about the poor but maybe didn't want to sit around with them, kind of thing. So a little bit of a difference there.
Yeah, so getting the
and
sense,
that's not, it was only that the Working Center was becoming something that
I get you.
that it could
So you're seeing
keep
the
developing.
Global Community Centers looking at the poor from an international perspective, and people coming to say, hey, I want to help out, because you see that today. I mean, I know with my daughters and their friends go, like, it's like We Care, right? That organization.
Yeah.
So We Care is great, but you're like,
of
We
course.
Care in downtown Kitchener.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and it took some time for the global people to kind of say, what are you doing there? Like, there was always support, and we worked, and it helped to have like a sister organization. But the Working Center became its own organization.
Yes.
By November 1982.
So you didn't incorporate right away.
Well, pretty close.
Okay, yeah, it was.
I don't think it could,
you're right. It was like 6 months. Yeah, 6 months later.
We had our charitable number soon after that.
Did you? So when you, I'm just, it's interesting because, but for you going to Teachers College, who knows what we'd have today?
Right.
It's very interesting. So you make this conscious decision, you and Stephanie, to say we're not going to go because you got accepted to Teachers College.
Yeah.
So
I think.
We're not going to Teachers College. We're going to stay and continue to do this. And it was like within a few months of doing that work what did you find in that few months, that initial few months?
Well, I think we found a community of people who were not supported, who maybe would get shelter at the House of Friendship, but then had nothing else to do. There weren't very many jobs. Jobs are really hard to come by. So high levels of frustration, high levels of sense of defeat. When, say, you're an individual whose family's breaking down and you can't even get a job on top of that.
Right.
And, just those are the things, this young kid who was stealing food for his family, and, he ended up getting arrested, and then you go see him in jail. It wasn't jail, but maybe at the court. I guess it would be at the courthouse.
Sure.
And so these are like, wow, this is crazy. We can't just abandon this work. We should find a way to create an infrastructure so that we can keep doing it.
Right. Okay. And that's where the Working Resource Center.
Working Center, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and we found Peter Lang.
Okay.
Remember, he would
Yes.
be an MP.
Yeah. Dr. Peter Lang.
Yeah, we would have found a couple grants. There used to be a group called the Employment Development Branch. There were community development grants back then, And so that helped a little bit.
And you started with an initial grant. Was it from the Global?
No, it was from, it's called Plura. First initials of Presbyterian, Lutheran, United Roman Catholic, and Anglican.
Oh, really? Okay.
Plura.
And were they local or?
No, it's an internet. It's a Canadian. It's the church coalitions, and they used this. I mean, this would be the most poorly funded. It was a poverty reduction kind of idea. To get a grant from Plura, you had to prove that you were a grassroots group, open to working with the poor, like hands-on.
And when you started, then
We did have a framework in that.
yeah, I was going to say, what was your initial concept in the sense that we're doing this on our own? We're looking for partnerships. What was the general view?
I think our general view wasn't that. Our general view was the pastoral circle, which is to learn the experience of people living with poverty, to do some social analysis, to bring ethics to that discussion, and then action. And really, the pastoral circle, which, Patrice Reitzel taught us this. She was working at Global as a church worker, and she taught us, she had learned it from the Jesuits, and it made so much sense to us. It's experience, analysis, ethics, action. I mean, it's just, there's a Catholic thing about see, judge, act. I mean, it's just another way of doing see, judge, act.
Right.
But it became meaningful for us. And projects grew from that. And interestingly, not bureaucracy. We were very rooted in work and not putting a lot of crap around it.
And when the crap, you mean like a hierarchy of bureaucracy, like managers, et cetera, right?
Irrelevant concepts.
So what was the first thing you branched out into then from your initial concept?
Well, I said Peter Lang, and that was really important. But there's another, both two people, politicians. Well, one's politician, one's businessman. Wayne Samuelson.
Yes.
Was leader of Labor.
Yep.
At the Labor Council.
And he was a municipal politician too for a period. Yeah.
And very open to the Working Center as a community group connected to labor, and really in other cities in Hamilton, the Working Center would have been crushed by labor,
by
bigger
unions?
Labor, because they would rather, they'd rather have a union shop doing that work or something like that.
Right, interesting.
But Wayne was really open to us, and Wayne was chair of the labor side of the ILAP committee, Industrial Labor Adjustment Program, which is a liberal thing, trying to deal with the plant closings around auto industry, and Jim Beingessner was the other chair.
Okay.
And,
well-known industrialist.
And
great guy.
So, if you talk to Jim or Wayne, they would both feel like they had a big hand in helping the Working Center get to step one.
Yeah.
And they both did, because they were co-chairs of that committee, and they gave us this grant. And the grant was, it was basically, back then, and it's missing today, and in some ways you understand why it's missing, but in other ways it's why people don't make the bridge that they should. But back then, you could be unemployed for a year, and if you worked 20 weeks, then you could get unemployment insurance for another year.
Right.
There's a lot of reasons why you don't want to do that, but there's a lot of reasons why that creativity of being out of work and then getting some work and then being off work again, you can turn that into something good too.
Yes. Yeah.
And we met lots of people who did. Anyways, what we were doing was employing people for 20 weeks.
Oh, so you were helping out. So you're bridging that. I mean, it was important because what was going on in '82? I mean,
there was 14. It was almost 12% unemployment around here.
And mortgage rates, interest rates were crazy. I mean, or on the verge of becoming crazy.
Yeah, it was 20% interest rates.
Yeah.
And what and we were very good at math, unlike, say, the government. Well, the unemployment insurance would say, well, there's 12,000 people who are unemployed.
Right.
Say the labor force was 100,000
Whatever
and
their
12%, so that would look like 12,000 people. But there were like 24,000 people on unemployment insurance.
Yes.
and that didn't include the 15,000 people that were on general GSA, whatever that was
or
called.
social assistance.
Social assistance.
Yeah. Yes. Or those that just sort of gave up, right?
Yeah. So there's a whole bunch of people that weren't even counted. So we knew that the numbers weren't very accurate, and the numbers were bad enough at 12% unemployed.
So were Jim and Wayne instrumental in like your the first time you got
funding? They had to approve it.
Okay.
That funding came through that committee.
The ILAP?
ILAP, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And it was 18 months, but we ran that became the beginning of St. John's Kitchen, because we called it as an unemployed worker center, established at St. John's Church, St. John's Anglican Church, January 1983, and that was in a whole new way. We learned about homelessness. We didn't call it that then, but people who weren't in the labor market, who didn't have an income, who would come, for the donuts and coffee every morning, and that was our busiest place. And eventually that became St. John's Kitchen.
So let's talk about starting that as an example of a success. So how did that come about in terms of, was your concept then these people would be working to participate in this kitchen to make it sustainable?
Well, it wasn't the kitchen at that point. It was this thing that we called unemployed worker centers. And there were 3 of them. There was one at Knox Presbyterian Waterloo, and one in Chicopee, and one at St. John's Anglican Church. And we employed, it was like 12 people at a time, maybe 3 per center. And they were all about, doing workshops on job searching, and there was crafts and all kinds of things. They wrote they had a newsletter that the 3 centers. So there is this kind of group. We have a great report on all the things that happened.
And the working center itself was located
down the street on Queen.
On Queen.
Yeah, and it was struggling. It wasn't part of those centers.
Right.
It was its own entity called the Working Center.
How was it sustaining itself?
I don't have a clue at this point. No, we actually, that's where Peter Lang did come through with a community development grant.
Right.
That kept it going. It gave it some life for about a year. We did some work on job sharing. We were developing kind of an idea of employment counseling using volunteers. And so there's a kind of a momentum, a different kind of people. The thing about the Working Center is we always have cultures. So like the St. John's Anglican Church Unemployed Worker Center was a culture in itself. The Chicopee one was something of itself. On Queen Street, it was another culture.
So these are like the partnerships that you're developing? Would you call it a partnership with these cultures, or these groups?
Yeah, more than a partnership. They're integral to the culture of the Working Center, in that the Working Center is like decentralized projects where people kind of find their skills and abilities in projects that are meaningful to them.
So you're helping to cultivate those interests.
Yeah.
It's like if someone came to you and said, I've got an interest in doing something, you would work with them to see how we can
you really
develop
want
it.
crafts. Well, they're doing all those crafts over at Chicopee. Why don't you check it, or you just want to serve people. Why don't we start doing food at St. John's Anglican Unemployed Worker Center kind of thing.
Well,
so we're building.
So clearly you branched out from all of that into all these other areas that we've talked about. For example, the bicycle.
Yeah, that took a while.
Bicycle recycle. Sure, it took a while. But just use that as an example of something, how did you develop that concept?
Well, the bike shop is a really good example. So, 1992, there's some university students. We ended up being really good friends with them. They're connected to WPIRG and environmental studies.
Right.
And that group, did a lot. Our bartering system grew out of it, but they had this idea they wanted to recycle bikes. And so they put this idea out, and 200 bikes showed up, and then they had to figure out how to fix them. And the city of Waterloo gave them a space in one of their places, I think the button factory in the basement. But over 3 or 4 years, students really, it's hard for them to keep anything going, and they graduate.
Right.
And the thing is sitting in an empty, unheated warehouse in downtown Kitchener, but it's not really operating. So we're renovating 43 Queen, second floor. We say, hey, why don't we recycle cycles? You're not really making it with, it's WPIRG running it. Why don't you let the working center operate that? So let's move all the contents that you've developed with recycle cycles, and we'll call it recycle cycles. It'll be its own culture. We'll reestablish it, but we're going to run it year round. First year, we probably only did like 200 bikes through there. We were open maybe 15 to 20 hours a week. Yeah, just about that. And Working Center invested a whole $5,000 a year, like out of our donations to help that get going.
Yes.
And
well, you gave them space too.
And space, free space. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's key.
And then, but when Recycle Cycles moved about 2011 from the space to the main floor or main.
On Queen. Yes.
King. No, it's on King. It's off. It's I don't know how you say that. It's off the laneway, but it's right off King Street.
Yeah.
So there's no walk up. It's all on the main floor.
Yes.
And we were, 3,000 people were fixing their bikes at the public bike stands, and 600 bikes were being refurbished and sold. So it was a going concern on the second floor, and that had taken 10 years to build into what it is.
What it is today.
Yeah. No, what it was that we moved it, and now it's probably doubled from there.
And it's sustainable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we always did it because we don't, it's not like there's no government money here. So we have to figure out, okay, if we're gonna do this, how are we generating enough money to pay for 1 staff, 2 staff? It's not that complicated.
And I'm always interested in the relationship between the Working Center and government, or local government, or regional government, or provincial government. And I always see the Working Center as a group that, through you and Stephanie, look, we've got an idea. This is what we want to do. Come along with us and let's work together. But we can't be bogged down, and we move ahead. And the most recent example for me was the Water Street project, because during the last municipal campaign, Water Street was going to be a consumption and treatment site. But then that didn't happen. But then the Working Center and you and Stephanie said, well, we're still going to go ahead with what we want to do with this property. So just tell me a little bit about the background on that.
So the Working Center, look, we needed housing. We needed housing for the group that's in the hardest situations, especially around use of drugs and mental health, the concurrent thing. So we had our eye on that building. The region did not have a place for a safe consumption site. And so we inserted ourselves in the middle of it, and we said, okay, we're going to buy this building. We know it's a public process. We know that we can't believe you won't side with us, but I know that it's very likely you won't. but we actually were more optimistic. Anyways, but we knew we could create housing on that property.
Right.
We had talked about it. It has a big backyard.
Yes.
And so we went ahead, purchased the property, and said it can be a safe consumption, but we're also going to be adding 10 or 15 units of housing on this property. And so the process went on, but during the process, we were going through the building process.
Yes, okay. So Working Center's
it.
concept came first. The safe consumption site or consumption treatment site was
an add-on
after.
And we did see it as a way to use that incremental idea to add to the housing to make the whole thing sustainable.
Right.
and interesting too.
Yeah.
But in, but you know, the neighbors weren't so happy with the
Sure.
concept.
Sure.
You know, I actually, we made good friends with all the neighbors, and I
Yes.
think we were on really good speaking terms with every one of those direct neighbors.
Yeah.
And that's kind of our way. And because, you know, we work at St. John's Kitchen, we know all our neighbors there too. Someone has a problem, like, oh, we need to build a fence, we'll build a fence. Is something going on? Oh, we'll come and clean that up. Oh, is there a problem? Oh, someone's sleeping there? We'll get our outreach worker there. Because, you know, just like the beginning of the working center, where we're thinking about the people who walk into the working center, we care about our neighbors too.
Right.
And I think, again, to
That's
me,
the
that's
key.
like so key to
It
sustainability.
is. Absolutely.
We're not better than the other person because we're helping this homeless
Right.
guy.
Right.
We're doing it together. It's part of community.
Yeah.
And, you know, groups that kind of think that, you know, this is holier than thou doing this.
Right.
That's wrong. That only creates animosity
Yes.
from
Yes.
one group to the other.
So you're pushed ahead, and it's not like you're opposed to working with government. It's
No, we would have welcomed their money.
Yeah.
But they chose another route, but it wasn't going to change us. You know, when we said that at council, it's not going to change what we're doing.
Right.
This is happening.
Yes.
We need this housing.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's always a bonus when you don't have to work with public health.
Because
Who
you're
wants
not
them?
bogged down
Yeah.
by their.
They have way
Bureaucracy.
more protocols than we would ever have.
So the working center
In 100 years.
minimizes the bureaucracy, pushes everything
Yeah.
down to the grassroots level.
Yeah.
And that's the key.
And public health by nature is the opposite.
Right.
So I don't know that we would ever be great partners anyways. And I'm sure that they were kind of worried about that anyways.
Right.
But they didn't have any other choice. When they had no other choice, we were a great partner.
Well, it's sort of the issue on the affordable housing. I mean, you have a number of homes that you manage now to assist, the supportive housing to assist the homeless.
We have over 60 units of housing. Not all of them for that group, but
Right. Of various. But these are
lots
houses
of-
where they're like 6 to 9 rooms per
Yeah.
home. It's a manageable situation.
yeah.
And
Yeah,
that's-
we probably need, we're building Water Street right now. It will have formally 8 bedrooms because of the parking issue. But, you know, I'm sure there will be overflow in that space.
Right.
But we could use 5 more such houses
Right.
right
So-
away.
Right away. So if
well,
you had
you know,
the
I was just at
resources-
St.
yeah.
John's Kitchen. I mean,
Yeah.
people are sleeping in St. John's Kitchen, like right now.
Yeah.
This is in the morning because they have no place to go.
So the working center itself, I mean, you have all these operations on the go. Is there an administrative
Function?
office somewhere? Like
There is.
there has
no.
to be.
We have a decent, but we hold not the administration, but the theory and approach and the coordination through a group called the Common Table. There's about 8 to 9 people. They're, you know,
Be like your
someone-
board of directors?
No, it's not a board. No, this is
Okay.
operations.
Okay.
There's a board of directors,
Yes.
of course, and then there's an operations group.
Okay.
That, you know, they're all operating things themselves, but it's the coordination between housing and St. John's Kitchen and the Unemployed Help Center and the community tools projects.
Yeah.
So it's, you know, the coordination to create a community. That's really important.
Yes.
But there's also the function, like all the whole bookkeeping.
You're right. Just
and
the
all
day to
that.
day. Yes.
That's gigantic.
So, you know, you and I had a discussion earlier about one company. Like, not everything's a success that you've done, and you've learned from these. And we won't. We don't have time today to get into it. Maybe some other time we'll come back and talk about that. But what I wanted to do was just ask you. You know, for anyone listening out there who is involved with a grassroots organization in the community, or they're thinking about starting up, or they've been maybe operating for a while and they're just not seeing traction, is there something that you could say to them that you would say, these are some of the keys to success, or these are some of the things that you should be considering?
I think, we have a really great book called Transition to Common Work. And it would have to really wade through all the pages. But a lot of the lessons are in the book. The thing that Stephanie and I learned, say, in our 20th year, and we're near 37 now, I guess, was, wow, this is amazing. If you stay at something, for 20 years, all of a sudden you have more knowledge than just about everyone else. And then the ability to translate that knowledge into good community programming is really crucial. So we need people to stick to ideas or stick to the community,
right,
and then build up from there. So like the long-termness, that helps a lot. So a lot of groups starting, if you're only there for 10 years, you don't got enough time. You need 20. And that's the opposite of the way our society thinks. The second thing is the relationships. I talked about Global Community Center. Margaret and Bob Nally, Margaret, who was our kind of mentor, and even I talked about Patrice.
Yes.
She recently was working as an employment counselor. She's retired now, but
right.
Margaret and Bob Nally. Bob is now on our board. Margaret works as kind of the chaplain. She is the chaplain at St. John's Kitchen, and does beautiful work within the working center. So there's so many long-term relationships in the culture of the working center.
Right.
This holds things together, and organizations need that desperately.
So good collaboration. And then,
Yeah.
like, before you got to your 20 years, you needed to obtain the advice of people who'd been around for a while. So it's like keeping your ears open and listening.
Oh, yeah. There's no question about that. Like, we were only dependent on other people offering their goodwill to help sustain us.
Yes.
So we had no monopoly on going forward.
Right.
We had to do a lot of listening.
And just as your core was sustained by people helping you out through your branching out and your experience, you're helping others within the framework of Working Center by developing these other concepts, like the dental practice, for example.
Yeah, always. Yes,
Yeah.
it's always, we're always building based on what we see. I mean, right now we were running a shelter 24 hours, but we're on 24 hours because from 7 o'clock at night until 8 or 9 in the morning, we're running a shelter. It was at St. Mary's, but now it's at another location.
Yeah.
40, 50 people are sleeping there a night because there is no other place for people to go.
Right. But just all the branches of the Working Center, I'll call it. You have sort of the 6 areas that you call it. But if people have a concept and want to come to you, you're open to seeing if you can make it work.
Yeah. And really, that shelter is a lot to do with 2 young people who they're both social workers, and they just can't bear to see so many people without a place. And what the thing is that they're part of the SOS team, which is supportive outreach services, which is some psychiatric outreach nurses and the social worker, and these are people. They're working with people who have concurrent disorders like high mental health, high addiction, and they don't have a place to live.
Right.
And they're and even providing something as measly as a floor of an old restaurant.
Right.
It's better than. It's at least a form of relationship.
Right, but
of
for
connection.
those 2 recognizing a need, working with you and your experience, you're able to say, "This is how we can make it happen."
This is how we can do it, and they're putting the energy. They're
Sure,
the ones
they're
who should
putting
be getting. They're up all night.
But you're
They've been
providing
up all
the
night
guidance.
for the last 5 weeks.
Right, but you're providing the guidance in terms of the basics. And you're right.
That's
you
right.
need good people.
Yeah.
Because without them, you wouldn't be sustaining
That's
this
right.
yourself, right?
Yeah.
So it's a collaboration.
Yeah, but the life of the working center is really great when that happens.
Yes, and it reminds me, I was reading on your website when I was looking at various fundraising concepts, and anyone listening consider making a donation to the Working Center or one of their organizations. But there is that the young lady that organized the trek
Tessa.
across the region, and I know my friend Alex Kinsella recently wrote about the great work they're doing.
Oh, yeah.
But that's a great way where someone has come up with a concept, is able to work with you and develop
That's right.
a way that people can learn
Yeah.
about what's happening, and at the same time raise funding to assist.
Yeah. And Tessa is completely independent, but we work really closely together.
Yeah.
And that's a good model of community. And
Yes.
figuring out how we do that, where
Yeah.
you're building the trust
Yes.
and the relationship. And
Yeah, I'll just end because
yeah.
our time's pretty well
I
wrapped
do
up,
have-
and we could go on.
I would love to. There's something else about Working Center.
Yes.
We commit to taking less. And so it's structured into the organization, and it's structured from the top down. And in fact, people, the cafe workers make as much as the managers, and that's a really a good thing because it does reduce bureaucracy,
Right.
and it makes us vital in our work.
Yes, I think it's a great.
So it's just one of those keys of sustainability.
Yes,
from
yes.
my perspective.
Yeah, and it's a great story. It reminds me of when I was out in North Dumfries and we were talking about a new community center. And so we had started a community group and then met with Bill Davidson from Langs. And one of the things that he taught me was the concept of collaboration and partnership. Each group builds a wall, and from these 4 walls, a community center is built. And so that's each providing
Right.
something to the whole project, makes the project happen, because you can't do it with one wall.
Right.
Joe, listen, I want to thank you for coming in today, and I want to again commend you and Stephanie for the wonderful work that you're doing in our community. And I look forward to reading more about how it develops and evolves over time. Thanks for coming in today.
Well, thank you very much.